All right. Hello. Good afternoon. So, did you dial into the Rachel V speech yesterday? Because I found it, I was filming in London, but I watched part of it live and I found it really fascinating to see just the back and forth between her and Jeremy Hunt, the accusations, the rebuttals, and it was like fireworks. And I don't like seeing politics in that manner, but you could see passion on Labour's side, and you can see the passion on the Conservative side. It's fascinating, but what does it mean for ordinary people? Because clearly there was something spoken about yesterday that will have an impact. And as you've seen on the thumbnail here, pensioners seem to be at the forefront of what's already been announced right now in terms of winter fuel payments being taken away from 10 million pensioners. I've got a couple of suggestions for that specifically. But what I want to do is just run through a few things that I've noticed and some narratives. And I'd love to get your opinion all the way through this, because I think we're at this position right now where this is still foreshadowing. And yesterday was a big part of the foreshadowing of what is going to come in the autumn budget in October. And I feel like there are going to be some really nasty surprises. And ironically, we're back where we were 14 years ago when the roles were reversed. The Tories came in and took over from Labour. They pointed fingers. They told everyone that it's their fault. And there's a lot of political angling around the language that's being used around this party should never be allowed to be in control of public services, public finances. Again, we're hearing that from Rachel Reeves and some of her commentary on Sky News over the past 12 hours or so. And I find it very, very interesting how it's all being positioned and how it's all being fought out. Now, I didn't vote for either of them, so I'm looking at this as someone who I don't have a dog in a fight. Well, I do because I'm a citizen, but I don't have any vested interest because I voted for either of them. But it's very, very interesting to see this jostling for power. And I guess in the case of Labour now, cementing the power for the future as well in some of the things that they're doing and the words that they're using right now. But I do want to play you a few clips because I think it's really important. And I want to talk a little bit about maybe what is coming in the autumn statement in October. First, though, I want to play you a clip. And we don't typically see politicians calling other politicians liars, but we saw that literally this morning on Sky News, Rachel Reeves calling Jeremy Hunt a liar. And it's really fascinating to see. And I love the reporter for doing this, flipping the script and pointing the finger back at Labour. You've got to watch this. It's really fascinating. I'm just going to pull this up right now because I've got to give this guy a lot of credit. It was a great kind of setup in terms of how he positioned this. So let's have a little listen here.
Explicitly in the speech that the past government covered up a £22 billion hole in the public finances. Are you saying that Jeremy Hunt is a liar?
Jeremy Hunt covered up from the House of Commons and from the country the true state of the public finances. He did that knowingly and deliberately.
So he's a liar. If he covered something up knowingly, he's a liar.
He lied, and they lied during the election campaign about the state of the public finances.
It's.
And the worst thing is, Wilf, it's even worse than that, because during the general election campaign, I was really clear that everything that I was putting forward was fully costed and fully funded. We had these pages in our manifesto that...
Now, look, that right there is questionably a lie, because again, I've mentioned in previous videos that when you look at the reports from the Institute for Fiscal Studies, and they look at, providing accountability to the government, like if you make this decision, if you make this, budgetary kind of decision, fiscal decision, this is the impact on business and individuals. They came out and said that there was a conspiracy of silence, and the fact that we weren't talking about the matters that really should be discussed in an election cycle. And more importantly, the fact that none of the parties, not just Labour, not just the Conservatives, but none of the parties, none of their manifestos were fully funded. So this right here is arguably a lie as well, because we know from those sources that they weren't funded. They weren't fully costed.
So that set out the limited tax changes we were going to make and how that would pay for example, 40,000 appointments a week extra in the NHS. The Conservatives during the election campaign said that they were going to cut national insurance further, that they were going to create a national citizenship service, that they were going to cut taxes for pensioners, that they were going to change the rules on child benefit, all the while knowing there was already a £22 billion black hole in the public finances. It is beyond reckless and irresponsible. And at a time when trust in politics is already at an all-time low, after Partygate, after all those contracts to friends and donors of the Conservative Party, to then mislead people in that way during a general election about what was possible, it is unforgivable, and they should never be allowed to have their hands on power and our public finances again.
So it's really interesting to hear you go as far as you just have.
Really interesting.
And I've been poring over all of the detail of this overnight. And, there's clearly a lot of experts who do agree with some of the details that you're saying. When you're calling someone a liar, it's really important to have all of the backup information absolutely spot on. I just wonder whether the £22 billion figure is all legitimately a black hole, because as lots of experts have analysed overnight, £9 billion of that is the public sector pay increase, which is a choice. Now, maybe it was a choice that, based on the prior estimates, any government would have to make and had not been provided for. But it was a detail that we all knew about coming into this election, and it's just a choice that you've decided to make, maybe the right choice, that's costing £9 billion. Should it be more of a 10 or 11 billion pound black hole?
And this is a great question, right? Because when you think about a black hole, it's supposed to be a gap in the committed expenses, or you're committed expending right now. The 5.5% pay increase for public sector workers, and I think this is for teachers and other public services, that isn't in the current spending plan. And she will say, well, actually, the cost of them going on strike, we can't let this continue. That's been her narrative, that to drop in the ocean to include this and to make sure that we can, get this under, done and wrapped up, which I agree. I think teachers should definitely have a pay rise, but should it be included in the black hole? And the question that he's asking here is, it's going to cost 10 billion quid. So if you really were truthful about this and you weren't lying, is it a lie? You tell me in the chat. I don't know. Maybe it's a white lie, right? I don't know. Should the black hole not just be 10, 12 million quid, or 10 to 12 billion? Let me get my teeth in. Billion quid in opposed to 22. So is there some dressing up happening right here? And I think it's a really important question to ask, and one that has been challenged, and rightly so. But as a consequence of this, what she announced yesterday were a few things, and I just want to go through them with you very first, so quickly. So infrastructure projects are going to be scrapped. Railway projects are being scrapped. There was a motorway or a piece of road that was supposed to go under Stonehenge. That's gone. Extensions to NHS hospitals, those are also gone. The question is going to be, what does that do for economic growth? Because that's obviously one of their big goals that they campaigned on, trying to get the economy growing. So with those infrastructure projects now basically gone, what does that do for that outlook in terms of economic growth? We know that they've cut that winter fuel payment, and let's talk about this a little bit. So it's going to save 1.5 billion quid. Many people this morning are arguing, is it enough to justify? Are you saving enough to justify the pain that it's going to cause for 10 million pensioners who this Christmas may need the money to actually warm their homes? And if you think about people who may have medical conditions where they need to have a warm home and they're not getting this help, that could be a massive impact. This is the difference between people going, warm during the winter, having to choose between heating and eating. This is a really big deal, and it will impact a lot of people. The good news here is, according to Martin Lewis, there are about 800,000 pensioners right now who are eligible for things like pension credits. So the deal is, you lose winter fuel payments unless you're in receipt of pension credits. So according to the numbers, 800,000 pensioners right now are eligible for things like pension credits. So the advice is, if you are a pensioner, or if you know someone who's a pensioner, please share this. Get them to go onto the government website and just check whether or not they're eligible for pension credits. Because if they are, they get to keep their winter fuel payment. And that will be a massive, massive help. The other thing that they are going to bring forward, and they kind of kicked this into the long grass, said maybe 2025 at some point, was VAT on private schools. Now, this is a really interesting one because they're bringing it forward now to January. So in January, anyone who's sending their kids to private school is going to have to pay 20% VAT on top of their school fees. their term fees, right? So lots of money. Now, the argument is that this is kind of like a tax on people who are well-to-do. I don't think that's necessarily true 100% of the time. I think there are some very, very hard-working people who are sending their kids to private school, and not just because they have the money, but they may have special education needs, and they have to go to a private school that aren't, earning the top 1%, £180,000 per year. They might be earning 50, 60, £70,000 per year. It's still good money, but they're having to make that sacrifice for their children's needs to go into private school. And what they're saying is that about 7% of kids at the moment are being educated in private schools. That number is about 500, 600,000 kids. Now, the analysis from some of these bodies are saying that because of this introduction where VAT is no longer going to be accepted from private school fees, about 10% of kids currently in private school fees will go back into the public schooling sector. And that presents a challenge because ultimately public schools are full, so there's not space. Now, what Labour have said is that this VAT charge will go to fund 6,500 teachers. The question is that going to be enough? Class sizes are already big. My partner is a teacher. Class sizes are already unmanageable. So will the new influx of teachers that they bring in, and this is not going to be an immediate fix, is it going to be effective in terms of you might have 50, 60,000 additional kids from private coming into the public sector? Are you going to be able to recruit enough teachers to cover that and to deal with the existing workload and class sizes? Big question. I have no idea the answer to that. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. The other thing that they're kind of earmarking, and this will probably come in later on in October when the autumn statement is, capital gains. We've already spoken about inheritance tax a couple of days ago. That is likely to go up to 54.4%. Capital gains tax, though, they're looking to equalize that with income tax rates. Now, look, we talk about investing and all that good stuff, personal finance here on the channel. Is it a good thing? My issue is this. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I mean, look, nobody likes to pay more tax, but if it helps the NHS and it helps us have a better society, I guess most people will be happy with it. I'm okay with it as well. But I think you get into this environment where it becomes a danger where you disincentivize people from investing. You disincentivize people from doing the right thing and trying to build some kind of financial cushion for themselves, because you're taxing it. You're taxing it on income. You're going to tax it once it's invested on the return that they basically get. Like, you can't keep just doing this over and over. But here's the bigger issue for me. You tell me whether you agree with this or not. The way I've been seeing this kind of positioned is that this is kind of like a wealth-ish tax, or it's a form of a wealth tax. And this is not what I want this to be petitioned as. I want a wealth tax where you tax wealthy people's assets. And I think, it's only fair that you have maybe like a tiered bracket system, right? So if you've got assets between 1 and 5 million quid, you pay this much in tax. If you've got between 5 and 20 million, you pay this bracket. Over 25 million, you pay this much in tax. That's what I want to see. I don't want to see capital gains equalization or playing around with capital gains allowances banded out to be a wealth tax, because it will still scoop in people who are just trying to make ends meet, just trying to invest, build wealth, right? Who are not necessarily wealthy in assets because they've not acquired vast sums of money that they can generate an income from that they popped offshore. That's my problem with this. I don't like the positioning and the framing. You let me know whether you disagree in the comment section. Those are the main things that she's basically changed. But there are a couple of things. Well, let me just point out. There are two things I want to point out. I want to point out some comments that she's made around difficult choices that are coming. I'm going to leave that till last, but I do want to show you something that was said by the CEO of the Institute for Fiscal Studies. And this was around some of the stuff that they've already done yesterday, they've already spoken about yesterday. And this will segue quite nicely into the second thing that I want to talk about, where I want to show you a graph just to kind of, I don't know, foreshadow what I think might be coming a bit later on. So let's just listen to this very quickly.
As we said during the election campaign, one of the there was more in the Labour manifesto about what they would not do on taxes than about what they would or might do. So they're very clear. They won't increase national insurance, VAT, income tax or corporation tax, or at least the main rates of those taxes. It's worth saying that if, as has been speculated, Rachel Reeves comes out and says that the hole in the public finances is around £20 billion, that's almost exactly the cost of the national insurance cuts that Jeremy Hunt introduced this year. So simply reversing those and getting back to where we were last autumn in national insurance would actually deal with a large part of the problem. It looks like Labour have ruled that out. That leaves them with much more difficult sorts of tax changes, quite technical changes to capital gains tax, perhaps, needs to happen, to be fair, and to inheritance tax. I mean, there are taxes that you could change, make them more equitable, and potentially get some more money from them. But the amount of money you get is somewhat more uncertain. It's not enormously big, and it's quite a complex thing to change.
Thanks so much for joining us.
That right there is the point that I really want to kind of like hang on, just as I show you the very next clip, because I mentioned this on my last video a couple of days ago, that if it is true, if we were led to believe that the shortfall in public finances was this 20 billion quid, which we've now found out 5.5% pay increases, which equates about 10 billion quid, is also included in that somehow. But if it was true that the NI cuts were the black hole, then going back to default where we were prior to Jeremy Hunt introducing that would have been an easy fix, I guess, or at least in my simple way of thinking, that's what I thought would be maybe a good idea. And you could maybe say that actually they are keeping to their manifesto promise not to increase national insurance or other taxes, income tax specifically, on working people. And I don't know, is a question for you. If they reverse the tax cuts that Jeremy Hunt introduced because it's part of this black hole, if they reversed it, put us back to where we were, is that a tax increase? Because it's not an increase from where we were. I don't know. You let me know in the comment section down below. But you get the point, right? So we don't know, but they've said a lot about the fact that they don't want to do certain things. And this leads me on to the very last video that I actually want to show you, which is a question that she's been asked yesterday about the choices that she's going to have to make. And I'm going to show you a graph after this as well. So let's listen.
Some BBC News. Chancellor, you said today that in the budget in October, you'll have to take difficult decisions on benefits, spending and tax. Can you be straight with people tonight and say that you will be putting up taxes for some in the autumn?
Well, I reiterated the commitments we made in our manifesto today. I don't want to increase taxes on working people, and our commitment not to increase national insurance, income tax or VAT. We stand by those commitments. We also published written ministerial statements today on the tax changes that we've had in our manifesto around the energy profits levy, VAT on private school fees, non-dom tax closures and changes to the private equity taxation. We will go ahead with that.
Right, so look, she's reiterating the original commitment not to increase income tax, national insurance contributions, VAT. Make no mistake, everything that happened yesterday's political theatre is foreshadowing what is going to come in October in the autumn statement. But I think there's more foreshadowing to come. And I've said it before, I don't know how they're going to raise the money that is required, because the black hole only fixes the issues and our spending right now. It doesn't talk about investing in the NHS and making public services better, right? So the money has to come from somewhere. Yes, they're probably going to have to borrow more money, increase the national debt, but tax is an important revenue stream for the government. And this is why I think that they're going to have a big problem not touching income tax, national insurance, and VAT. Now, I have shown this graph a number of times in different videos. If you've been following the channel, this will be familiar. This is a composition of tax revenue 2023 to 2024. This is the forecast, right? And this is from the IFS. So income tax, national insurance contributions, these two represent about 42% of the government's revenue. When you put in VAT, which they've also committed not to increase, this part of the pie here is about 54%. Now look at all the other areas in which they could generate tax income from. corporation tax. Okay, that might increase, but they've committed that they would not increase it immediately, maybe from 2025. Other indirect taxes, business rates, council tax, uh, capital taxes like capital gains, that we're talking about equalizing that, other taxes and royalties. But the collection of these are not big enough to compete with this. So how are they going to generate enough revenue to solve the fiscal problems moving forward without touching these? I just don't see it. I mean, if you do see it, please let us know in the comment section. But I think this is worthwhile talking about. This is worthwhile us being aware of, because I believe that when we get to the autumn statement in October, I feel like there's going to be a surprise there. I just do. And it's purely for that reason. The largest portion of tax revenue is in the three taxes they said that they are not going to touch. I don't see how they're going to be able to do it. But let me know what you think in the comments. Thanks for watching this. Just in closing, tomorrow we've got more news from the Bank of England around the Bank of England base rate, which if you're a saver and a borrower, you're going to have keen interest in, particularly if you're a borrower, you've got a mortgage, you're going to have keen interest in. I'm going to be doing another video tomorrow, just kind of outlining what the changes are, what that basically means. By way of interest, this evening, 5 p.m., there's also another video that I'm going to publish which talks about getting the best interest rate with interest rates falling. And that is likely to happen tomorrow. So how do you go about positioning your money if you are a saver? So come back at 5 p.m., watch that video. You'll get a lot from that because it talks about how it all works. And there's something that you could literally take away and go and do. Thank you so much for watching this. Let me know what you think about this conversation in the comment section. I appreciate you. Have a good afternoon. Cheers.